The flowers were still fresh. White roses, baby's breath, gardenias, every single one handpicked by me. 3 weeks before the wedding. 240 guests were seated, dressed in their finest, holding their programs, waiting. I was standing in the bridal room, looking at myself in the mirror, thinking, this is it. This is the day everything finally comes together. And then my maid of honor, Kendra, walked through that door with a face I will never forget for the rest of my life. She couldn't look me in the eyes. She just held out her phone. What I saw on that screen, a video taken 20 minutes earlier in a storage room 2 floors below, completely destroyed the version of my life I thought I was living. My fiancé, my sister, together, not panicked, not ashamed, comfortable, like this wasn't the first time, like there was nothing wrong with it. I stood there in my wedding dress, holding someone else's phone, watching the 2 people I trusted most act like I didn't exist. And then my phone rang. It was my bank. Stick with me, because what happened next changed everything, not just for me, but for every single person in that church. My name is Maya Cole, 34 years old, born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. I didn't grow up with money. My mother worked double shifts at a hospital most of my childhood. My father left when I was 9. So I learned early, you don't wait for people to save you. You save yourself. I started my business at 26, a small event planning company called Bloom and Grace. Just me, a laptop, and a shared office space. By 32, Bloom and Grace had 12 employees, a full warehouse, and contracts with 3 of the top hotels in Columbus. I wasn't rich, but I had built something real, something mine. People called me warm, reliable, the kind of person who always showed up. If everything was on fire and you needed someone to stay calm, you called Maya, which is probably exactly why I didn't see it coming. I met Obafemi Carter at a charity gala I coordinated in the fall of 2021. Charming, confident, the kind of man who makes you feel like the only person in the room. We dated 2 years before he proposed. My mother cried happy tears. My little sister Amara hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. My whole family celebrated like something long overdue had finally arrived. Amara, 29, beautiful, bright, was my maid of honor. She helped me choose the dress. She sat with me every Saturday for 3 months going through flowers, menus, seating charts. She was there for all of it. That's the part that still gets me, even now. Not just that she did it, but how completely present she was through the whole planning process. Smiling, supportive, helpful. I had no idea. 6 months before the wedding, Obafemi started spending more time at my office. He said he wanted to understand my world. I thought it was romantic. He asked questions about clients, contracts, which accounts deposits went into. He offered to help with invoicing one weekend when I was overwhelmed. I handed him my login credentials without a second thought, because this was the man I was about to marry. 3 months out, my bookkeeper flagged a discrepancy. About $4,000. Obafemi said it was a bank processing error. He'd handled it. I didn't need to worry. I believed him. I didn't look deeper. And Amara, the closer we got to the wedding, the more she was around Obafemi. Planning meetings, tastings, venue walkthroughs. I was grateful to have a sister who cared that much. God, I was so blind. 2 weeks before the wedding, I came home early from a canceled meeting. Obafemi's car was in my driveway. Amara's car right behind it. I thought, they're probably dropping something off. They both had keys because I trusted them. I walked in through the garage. The house was quiet. I called out. No answer. Then I heard Amara laugh. That specific laugh she does when she's trying to be quiet but can't quite manage it. Coming from upstairs. I stood at the bottom of those stairs for what felt like a full minute. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Obafemi. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. He was in my house, texting me that he wasn't home. I walked back out to the garage, got in my car, and sat there shaking for 20 minutes. I told myself I was jumping to conclusions. I drove to Kendra's and didn't say a word about what I'd heard, what I'd felt, or what my entire body was screaming at me. Because I wasn't ready to know. Not yet. 3 days before the wedding, my bank called. A fraud investigator named Patricia Webb. She told me that over 4 months, a series of withdrawals had been made from my business operating account. Each one just under the automatic reporting threshold. 14 transactions. $62,000 total. All authorized using my credentials. All transferred to a shell company called Bridgepoint Commercial Consulting, LLC. I had never heard of that name. When I looked it up that night, shaking at my kitchen table, the listed business address was O'Baphame's apartment. I sat there at 11 o'clock with $62,000 gone, wedding invitations on the counter, and my dress hanging in the hallway. I could have called the police that night. I could have called everything off. But I was still hoping, desperately, stupidly hoping. There was an explanation I hadn't thought of. So I carried it to the wedding. And I almost walked down that aisle anyway. The morning of the wedding, by 10:30, I was in my dress. Hair done. Makeup done. Bouquet in my hands. Kendra walked in with that face and handed me her phone without a word. The video was 43 seconds long. O'Baphame and Amara. Storage room. Him in his wedding suit pants, shirt half unbuttoned. Her in her bridesmaid's robe. And the way they were talking, low, relaxed, told me this wasn't a mistake. This was routine. Then O'Baphame said something that stopped my heart. After today, we won't have to hide anymore. The accounts are already moved. We just have to get through the ceremony. Amara said, "Do you think she suspects anything?" He said, "Maya? No. She trusts everyone." He laughed when he said it. My phone rang while I was still watching. Patricia Webb again. The account had been drained overnight. Another $38,000. Effectively empty. I hung up. I looked at myself in the mirror. I put the bouquet down on the vanity. And I walked out of that bridal room. I didn't go to the sanctuary. I walked past the side doors, past the flower arrangements, past the programs with my name and O'Baphame's name side by side, and straight out the front of the church. I sat down on the stone steps in my wedding dress. It was a Saturday in June. 72 degrees. The sky was that perfect blue that has no right being that beautiful on the worst day of your life. I didn't cry. Not right away. Inside, I could hear murmuring. The organist playing the same piece for the 4th time. My mother's voice, frantic, asking someone where I was. I couldn't move. At some point, I became aware of someone beside me. Not standing. Beside me. At my level. I looked over. A man in a wheelchair. Parked right next to the stone steps. Close enough that we were almost eye to eye. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the parking lot. Calm. Still. He had a quiet face. Steady. There was something very steady about him. He said, without turning, "You don't have to explain anything." Just that. I don't know why those 5 words broke me open. But I started crying right there on those steps, in front of a complete stranger, and he just sat beside me and didn't say another word. After a while, I wiped my face. I said, "I was supposed to get married today." He said, "I know. I'm here for the wedding." Distant acquaintance of the groom. He paused. "I don't think it's happening." I almost laughed. I asked his name. He said, "Dennis. Dennis Okafor." I said, "Maya Cole." We shook hands. Very formal. Very strange. And then, some mixture of grief and fury and this absolute refusal to walk back in there with nothing. I said, "Dennis Okafor, would you be willing to do something completely insane with me?" He turned and looked at me for the first time. Dark, careful eyes. He said, "Depends on what it is." I said, "Marry me. Today. Right now. There's a justice of the peace 2 miles from here. I know you don't know me, but I need to walk back through those doors as someone's wife. I need them to know they didn't break me." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "I have one condition." I said, "What?" He said, "You walk back in there with your head up. Not for revenge. For yourself. I said, deal. We went to the Justice of the Peace on Kelton Avenue. I was still in my dress. Dennis wore the navy blazer he'd arrived in. The Justice of the Peace raised one eyebrow, but didn't say a word. 22 minutes later, Maya Cole became Maya Okafor. We drove back to the church. I walked through those front doors, and all the way up to the altar where Obafemi was still standing, confused, looking like a man who had no idea what was coming. Amara was in the front pew. My mother in the third row. 240 people went completely silent. I said, clearly and calmly, I know about the money, Obafemi. I know about the shell company. And I know about the storage room. I watched the color drain from his face. Amara stood up and opened her mouth. I looked at her and said, don't. She sat back down. I said, I'm not here to make a scene. I just came back to let everyone know. I'm still standing. And I got married today after all. I turned around and walked out. The first weeks of that marriage, we were strangers. Dennis had an apartment on the east side. Clean, modern, quiet. He made space without pressure, set up a spare room, stocked the kitchen, left a key on the counter with a note that said, no obligations. Just a safe place. He didn't push. He didn't perform. He just made room. I learned small things. He cooked well. He read constantly. He had a workspace in the second bedroom he kept half closed, filled with monitors, documents, financial charts. He said he did consulting work. He had a physical therapist named Rowan who came 3 times a week. Sometimes after sessions I'd hear them laughing through the wall. Dennis had been in a car accident 4 years earlier. He said it the same way you'd say, I moved here from Chicago. No drama. Just a fact. But I noticed things. The way he looked at his legs sometimes when he thought no one was watching. Not with anger. With grief. Like they were someone he used to know. The way certain phone calls made him go completely still. The way the workspace light was on until 2 a.m. And through the door I could hear formal, serious conversations that didn't sound like consulting. One night I asked directly, what do you actually do, Dennis? He looked at me over his coffee cup. He said, I manage some investments. I said, big ones. He said, significant ones. And that was all. For now. 6 weeks in, a courier arrived with a sealed envelope. Okafor Holdings, confidential. Embossed gold letters. I knew that name. Everyone in Columbus knew it. One of the largest private holding companies in the Midwest, real estate, logistics, medical technology. The founder had died 4 years ago. His older son, Victor, had been running it ever since. I brought the envelope to Dennis. He read it. His expression didn't change. He set it face down on the desk. I said, is that from who I think it's from? He said, my brother wants a meeting. I said, your brother is Victor Okafor? Yes. Which makes you? Dennis Okafor. That's all I am right now. I sat down slowly. Everything rearranged itself in my mind. I said, how big is your family's company? He was quiet for a moment. He said, bigger than I'd like to explain tonight. Victor Okafor came 3 days later. Nothing like Dennis. Louder. Expensive suit. The kind of man who fills a room before he finishes walking into it. He looked at me the way you look at a problem someone else created. He said to Dennis, without acknowledging me, you got married. To a stranger. While representing this family's name. Dennis said, she's my wife. You'll address her. Victor looked at me then. Flat eyes. He said, I hope you understand what you've involved yourself in. I said, I understand I married your brother. Is there anything else? He spent 15 minutes trying to convince Dennis to return to the company officially, in this self-imposed exile. Dennis listened without expression. When Victor finished, Dennis said 2 sentences. The board meeting is Tuesday. I'll attend by video. Send the materials tonight. Victor left without another word. When the door closed, Dennis looked at the window for a long moment. He said, my father left controlling interest in Okafor Holdings to me. Not Victor. After my accident, Victor stepped in under a temporary arrangement. For years later, he's been making decisions he doesn't have authority to make. I said, "What kind of decisions?" He said, "The kind that look legal until someone examines them carefully." 3 months into our marriage, a friend called. She said, "Maya, something strange is happening to Obafemi's business. 3 major contracts disappeared. Investors are backing out. The development firm he partnered with just cut ties." I hung up and walked straight into Dennis's workspace. He was on a call. He saw my face, ended it, and looked at me. I said, "Is it you?" He held my gaze. He said, "He stole from you." I said, "Dennis." He said, $62,000. That was years of your company's growth. He drained your accounts 4 days before your wedding, so you'd be financially dependent on him afterward. He needed you vulnerable. I stood there. He said, "Bridgepoint Commercial Consulting was funded through a company in Victor's portfolio. Obafemi worked with Victor's network for 2 years before he met you. Your company was a target. Bloom and Grace had contracts with 3 hotels Victor wanted to acquire. Obafemi marries you, gains access to those contracts. Victor absorbs the hotels. You never know why it happened." The whole room shifted. I said, very slowly, "This was never about love." Dennis said, "Not from his side." He said it quietly. No drama. Just the truth, sitting there between us. I said, "And Amara?" He said, "She may not have known about the financial piece. We're still working through it." He said that carefully, like he understood it mattered to me. I said, "You've been protecting me." He said, "I've been protecting the truth. You deserve to know it. Here's what I need you to understand about Dennis Okafor. He didn't save me. I had already saved myself, sitting on those church steps, deciding not to collapse. What Dennis gave me was something different. Safety. Not the safety of money or power, the safety of consistency. He was the same person every single morning. He said what he meant. He kept every promise, even small ones. He taught me chess. I was terrible. He had infinite patience and found my terrible chess genuinely interesting. I started bringing him coffee at 11 p.m. when the workspace light was on. He started leaving my favorite yogurt brand in the fridge without me asking, after he noticed I always reached for it first. One afternoon in September, I walked past the open doorway of his therapy room. He was gripping the parallel bars, arms shaking, jaw set. He got up. Just briefly. Just a few seconds. But he stood. He looked up and saw me in the doorway. I was crying, apparently, without realizing it. He sat back down, breathing hard, and said very quietly, "Don't feel sorry for me." I said, "I'm not. I'm proud of you. There's a difference." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Nobody has said that to me in 4 years." In October, Amara called. I almost didn't answer. She was crying before I said hello. She told me she had met Obafemi a year before I did, that they dated briefly and it ended. She said when she met him again at my side, she tried to stay away. She said it spiraled and she hated herself. She didn't know about the money. She found out the same way the rest of Columbus did when the fraud investigation became public record. She said, "I know I have no right to ask for anything. I just needed you to know I didn't know what he was doing to your business." I was quiet for a while. I said, "I believe you about the money. I don't know how long it'll take me to forgive the rest." She said, "I know." I said, "Are you safe?" She said, "He's gone. Everything is falling apart for him." She started crying again. I think I just didn't believe I deserved better either. I said, "Yeah. We didn't fix everything that day, but we started." The case against Victor Okafor's unauthorized management decisions was filed in November. Dennis's legal team, 14 months of documentation, filed a 70-page complaint with the board. Financial audits, communication records, binding shareholder statements. Victor held a press conference claiming it was manufactured. The board reviewed everything for 9 days. On the 10th day, They voted unanimously to restore Dennis Okafor as active chairman of Okafor Holdings. Victor resigned before they could remove him. Obafemi's fraud case, built from bank records, the shell company registration, and Patricia Webb's testimony, resulted in criminal charges. He eventually took a plea. $100,000 in restitution, including interest and legal costs, ordered back to Bloom and Grace. I didn't go to the sentencing. I had a client's wedding to plan. A woman named Deborah who'd been on my waiting list for 8 months. I showed up and made it beautiful. The night after the board vote, Dennis asked me to sit with him in the workspace. He turned a monitor toward me. A foundation, newly established, called the Cole Foundation. I said, Dennis. He said, read the charter first. It was a grant foundation for women rebuilding small businesses after financial fraud or economic abuse. Fully funded. Initial endowment, $5 million. I looked up at him. He said, it's yours to run. Independent of Okafor Holdings. Independent of me. I said, that's too much. He leaned forward. He said, Maya, you know what I was doing in that workspace for 14 months? Documenting injustice. Because I sat here, invisible, and watched what happens when people with power decide someone without power doesn't matter. He said, you were going to lose everything you built from nothing over 10 years. And 2 people decided that was fine because they thought you were someone who could be walked over. He stopped. He said, that foundation is not charity. It's proof that they were wrong about you. I sat there for a long time. Then I said, you knew who I was before you married me. He said, I'd heard your name through the Obafemi connection. When I came to those church steps, I knew something had gone very wrong for you. I said, and you still said yes. He said, you asked me with your head up, Maya, in the middle of the worst day of your life, and you were still thinking about something bigger than revenge. You wanted to walk back in there with your dignity, not to hurt anyone, just to be unbroken. He looked at me. He said, I wanted to know a person like that. Dennis and Rowan continued the therapy through winter. By spring, Dennis could walk short distances with a cane. He didn't rush it. He didn't perform it. He just kept working, quietly, the same way he did everything. We had a real wedding. Small. People who mattered. Kendra as my maid of honor. Rowan as Dennis's best man. My mother in the front row with her hands clasped like she was holding something fragile and precious. Amara was there too. We were still rebuilding. Slowly. With honest conversations that sometimes hurt. But she was there. The Cole Foundation opened in March. In the first 6 months, we funded 14 women. A baker in Cleveland whose equipment was stolen by a business partner. A graphic designer in Cincinnati whose ex-husband drained her LLC. A florist in Dayton defrauded by a contractor. 14 women who built something real, were told it didn't matter, and showed up anyway. I sat across from every single one of them personally, because I knew exactly what it felt like to sit on church steps in a wedding dress wondering if you'd ever stop shaking. People ask me sometimes, what would you tell your younger self? Pay attention to the quiet ones. The people who don't need to fill every room they walk into. The ones who say exactly what they mean and then stop talking. The ones who make space for you without making you feel like a project. Those are the rare ones. And the harder thing, being someone who trusts people is not the same as being naive. I trusted Obafemi because I was a good person, not because I was blind. The failure belonged to him. The lesson wasn't trust less. The lesson was, when the truth shows up, don't look away. I had 3 moments where I could have looked. The night I stood at the bottom of those stairs. The morning the bank called, and I let Obafemi explain it away. The day of the wedding when I almost walked down the aisle anyway. Each time, I chose comfortable over true. I don't beat myself up about it anymore. Because the moment I finally stopped running from what I knew, everything changed. I found a man who thought being unbroken in the middle of devastation was the most extraordinary thing about a person. I built a foundation that changed the direction of 14 lives. I rebuilt my company, my relationship with my sister, my belief in myself. And Dennis Okafor, the quiet man in the wheelchair that everyone overlooked, underestimated, and counted out. He stood up, not for them, for himself. That's the thing about people who have been made invisible. When they finally decide it's time to be seen, the whole room changes. If this story moved you, if you've ever been counted out by someone who should have loved you, share this. Someone out there needs to know that sitting on those steps is not the end. Sometimes it's exactly where your real life begins. If you are yet to subscribe to this channel, please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.